I still remember the way my mom used to look at me, not angry, not disappointed, just unimpressed. Like every time I tried, I was proving her right all over again. My name's Ryan. I'm 32 now, but back then I was just a lanky kid with bad hair and big dreams that nobody in my family thought would amount to anything. If you asked my mom, she'd tell you she had two kids, one prodigy and one realist. The prodigy was my sister, Claire, 2 years older, always perfect. The kind of person who could spill soup and somehow make it look elegant. Straight A's, debate team, student body president. She was my mom's entire world. And me? I was the afterthought. The one she'd pat on the shoulder and say, "Maybe college isn't for everyone, honey." I used to laugh it off. What else could I do? My mom had this way of turning every conversation into a backhanded compliment. If Claire brought home a trophy, she'd host a little dinner party for it. If I brought home a good grade, she'd smile politely and say something like, "That's great, sweetie. See what happens when you actually focus." I told myself she meant well, that maybe she was just trying to motivate me. But as I got older, it became painfully clear that she just didn't see me as the kind of person who could ever succeed. Dad wasn't much help either. He was quieter, more neutral. He'd nod when Mom talked, occasionally shoot me a look like he wanted to say something encouraging but couldn't find the words. Claire had this way of making him proud without trying. She'd walk into a room, and it was like gravity shifted toward her. I'd be sitting there, trying to talk about something I was working on, a little coding project, a freelance gig, whatever, and Mom would cut in with, "Ryan, can you not interrupt?" Claire was talking, and then the conversation would just drift back to her, as if I'd never opened my mouth. The difference between us wasn't just grades. It was treatment. Claire got everything first: the new phone, the car, the emergency credit card. When she wanted to take a gap year before college, Mom called it soul-searching. When I said I wanted to work for a year before applying to school, she said, "Don't be lazy." And when the topic of the college fund came up, that sacred family savings account my grandparents had set aside for our education, Mom would always remind us both, "It's for whoever needs it most." I was naive enough to believe that meant both of us equally. That illusion didn't last. The summer after high school, Claire got into Stanford. My mom cried for 2 days straight. Not because she'd miss her, but because she'd have something new to brag about. "My daughter's going to Stanford," she'd tell anyone who'd listen. "She's going to change the world." Meanwhile, I decided to attend a state university. It wasn't glamorous, but it was affordable, and I'd worked hard to get in. I still remember telling my mom at dinner one night. She didn't even look up from her phone. "That's good, Ryan. I'm glad you're being realistic." I thought it was just her usual tone. Dismissive, sure, but familiar. But then she dropped the bomb 2 weeks before tuition was due. "Ryan," she said, as if she were reading off a grocery list, "we used the college fund for Claire's down payment." I blinked, waiting for her to laugh. She didn't. "What?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard her. "The college fund. You know, for school." She sighed like I was being difficult. "Ryan, your sister's tuition is covered by scholarships and grants. But she needs a safe place to live off campus. A good environment helps her focus. You'll be fine. You can take out a loan or start at community college. Be realistic." I remember feeling something twist inside me. It wasn't even anger at first, more like disbelief, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. "You used my money for her house," I said quietly. Mom crossed her arms. "It wasn't your money. It was for your education, and clearly, Claire's education is the priority right now. You'll understand when you're older." I didn't say anything after that. Dad muttered something about not having a say, and Claire just stared down at her phone, pretending to scroll. That was her thing. When things got messy, she went invisible. No eye contact, no opinions, just silence that made it impossible to hate her outright. The perfect daughter, even in guilt. That was the night something inside me shifted. I didn't scream or throw things. I just got up, walked outside, and sat on the porch until sunrise. My mom probably thought I was sulking, but I wasn't. I was thinking about how every time she'd told me to be realistic, what she really meant was stay small. About how every decision in that house revolved around Claire, and how no one, not once, had believed in me enough to think I could build something of my own. So I decided I would. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment where I swore revenge under the moonlight. It was quieter than that. I just made a choice, one that I never told them about. I decided I was done asking for permission to matter. I spent the next few years grinding harder than I ever had in my life. I couldn't afford a 4-year university, so I took a few night classes while working full-time at a tech repair shop. The pay was lousy, the hours long, and the customers unpredictable, but it taught me things no class ever could: how to talk to people, how to solve problems, how to think on my feet. I started doing small freelance jobs on the side, mostly fixing software bugs for local businesses or designing websites for cheap. My mom would still call occasionally, mostly to update me on Claire's latest milestone. She got promoted. She's dating someone from her firm. She's moving to California permanently. It was always Claire this, Claire that. I'd say that's great, and she'd respond with, "Don't be jealous, honey. Everyone's path is different." She never once asked how mine was going. By my mid-20s, I'd built a modest list of clients. Nothing crazy, just enough to pay rent and keep the lights on. But I was learning what worked, what didn't, what people were willing to pay for. I started noticing patterns, small inefficiencies in the way small businesses handled their online systems. One night, out of pure curiosity, I built a software tool to automate one of those problems. It wasn't much, but a local business owner paid me $500 for it. Then another paid $700. Before long, word started to spread. I didn't realize it at the time, but that little side project would change my entire life. Of course, Mom had no idea. As far as she was concerned, I was still figuring things out. She'd tell her friends I did computer stuff. In that tone parents use when they don't really understand but don't care enough to ask. Meanwhile, she'd visit Claire in her nice suburban home, the same one bought with my college fund, and post pictures on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of my girls," even though I wasn't in a single one. The irony didn't hit me until years later. She thought I was invisible because I didn't brag. She mistook quiet progress for failure. The last time I saw her before everything changed was at Christmas, when I was 26. I had just landed my first big client, a mid-sized logistics company willing to pay real money for my software. I was nervous but proud. I tried to tell her about it over dinner. She barely listened. "That's nice, honey," she said, pouring herself another glass of wine. "Maybe one day you'll get a real job." Claire chuckled, like it was a harmless joke. But something about it stung deeper than usual. Maybe because I was finally starting to believe I could make it. And hearing her say that felt like being shoved back into the box she'd built for me. That night, as they all laughed in the living room, I sat outside on the porch again. Same spot, same feeling. That cold clarity where you realize you're on your own. But this time, it wasn't loneliness I felt. It was determination. Because what my mom didn't know, what she would never have believed, was that I was already building something big. And one day, it would all come back around. That, one day, started much sooner than she ever expected. It began with a phone call. A call that would completely turn the power dynamic in my family upside down. And I'll never forget the sound of my mom's voice when she realized who she was talking to. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. My mom's name blinked across the screen. I stared at it for a long second, debating whether to pick up. The last time we'd talked, she'd spent 20 minutes explaining how life just isn't fair because Claire's company hadn't given her the promotion she wanted. I hadn't said more than 3 words the whole call. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "Ryan." "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice sugary sweet, the kind she only used when she wanted something. "You sound busy. Are you busy?" I glanced at the multiple tabs open on my laptop, the half-finished code, the invoices waiting for approval. "A little. What's up?" "Well," she started, dragging out the word like she was easing into bad news. "Your sister's moving into her new place next month, and we were wondering if you could come help with the move. You're good with heavy lifting, right?" I bit back a sigh. Her new place? Didn't she already have a house? "Oh, that was years ago," Mom said casually. "She sold that one. She and Eric bought a bigger home closer to the city. It's such a beautiful neighborhood, gated, near the water, amazing schools. You'll see when you come by." "I didn't know she got married," I said. Mom chuckled. "Engaged. Not married yet. He's a lawyer. Very successful. You'll like him." Of course he was. Claire's type was practically trademarked. Tall, clean-cut, ambitious, and conveniently useful to Mom's social circle. I should have been happy for her, but I couldn't ignore the twinge in my chest. That familiar reminder that I was never invited to things like this until someone needed free labor. I don't think I'll be able to make it, I said finally. There was a long pause. Then that disappointed tone she'd perfected over the years. Ryan, she's your sister. She helped you plenty of times when you were younger. Helped me? I almost laughed. The last time Claire helped me, she borrowed my car in college and returned it with a dent in the door, then told Mom it was my fault for not maintaining it properly. I still remembered paying for the repair myself because Claire has enough stress already. I've got work, I said. I'm on a deadline. She sighed dramatically. You're always so busy lately. You used to have time for family. Family. That word always felt heavy when she used it. Like a tool instead of a truth. I'll call you later, Mom. I hung up before she could say anything else. That was how most of our conversations went after that. Her asking for favors, me declining, her pretending to be hurt. Sometimes she'd send me pictures of family gatherings I wasn't invited to, claiming they just assumed I was busy. Other times she'd make little jabs about how Claire was really making something of herself, and how she hoped I'd find something stable soon. The thing was, I had found something stable. My small software company had just landed 3 new clients, and I was finally starting to earn enough to pay off my student loans and upgrade from my tiny studio apartment. But I didn't tell her that. I'd learned the hard way that every time I shared good news, she found a way to twist it. Like the time I mentioned I'd hired my first employee, a college kid helping with back-end code. Mom's response: that's risky. You can barely take care of yourself. What if it doesn't work out? Or when I said I was thinking about moving into a better apartment. Maybe wait until you're more established. You don't want to overreach. Overreach. That was her favorite word. It meant don't dream too big. So I stopped talking about my dreams altogether. Then came Claire's engagement party. The invitation wasn't from Mom. It was from Claire herself. A neatly written email with gold foil font and everything. She'd CC'd Mom, Dad, and a bunch of her friends. The subject line said, "Join us for our next big chapter." I stared at it for a while, unsure if I even wanted to go. Part of me wanted to decline. The other part, the quieter, stubborn part, wanted to show up, if only to remind them I existed. So I went. The venue was a rented hall near the coast, all white marble floors and tall windows overlooking the bay. Everything screamed money. Soft jazz playing in the background, tables lined with champagne flutes, a floral archway in pastel tones. I showed up in a decent blazer, nothing fancy. Mom took one look at me and frowned. "Oh, Ryan," she said, her smile tight. "You didn't dress up?" "I did," I said simply. She sighed, tugging at my sleeve like she could fix me by adjusting my clothes. "You could have borrowed one of your father's suits. This is a formal event." I looked around. Half the guests were in cocktail attire. My outfit was fine. But of course, it wasn't about clothes. It was about optics. In her mind, I was the blemish on her perfect family portrait. When Claire walked in, all conversation stopped. She looked radiant, in that movie scene kind of way. She spotted me and smiled. A genuine one, at least, before being swept up by a crowd of guests congratulating her and her fiancé. I stayed near the bar, quietly sipping soda, invisible as usual. Halfway through the evening, I overheard something that made my stomach knot. Mom was standing near a group of her friends, champagne glass in hand. "Both of my kids turned out so differently," she said with a little laugh. "Claire's the driven one. She always had big dreams. Ryan's more simple. He likes to tinker with computers and all that. But that's okay. Not everyone can be a star." The women laughed politely. I froze. I don't know why it hit harder that night than all the other times she'd belittled me. Maybe because I'd been working 12-hour days to keep my business afloat. Maybe because I'd come there hoping, just hoping, she'd see me differently after all these years. I left early, without saying goodbye. Claire texted me the next morning. "Sorry about Mom. She had too much to drink." I never responded. For months after that, I distanced myself completely. I stopped answering her calls. When she left voicemails asking why I was being dramatic, I deleted them. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was self-preservation. Every conversation drained me, chipped away at whatever confidence I had built. But just because I stopped talking to her didn't mean she stopped talking about me. One of my cousins messaged me on Facebook around that time. "Hey man, heard your company went under. You okay?" I blinked. "What? Who told you that?" "Your mom mentioned it at Thanksgiving." I stared at my screen, my jaw tightening. My company was doing fine, thriving, actually. But to her, admitting that would mean she was wrong about me. So she spread the opposite story. That's when I realized she didn't just underestimate me. She needed me to fail. Because if I succeeded, it would unravel the entire narrative she'd built her life around. That Claire was the shining star, and I was the cautionary tale. So I did what she least expected. I went silent, and I worked harder than ever. While she was busy showing off Claire's wedding invitations and house renovations, I was finalizing contracts, expanding my client base, and setting up meetings with investors. My little side project had grown into a real company, one that businesses were starting to take seriously. It wasn't glamorous yet, but it was mine. Every late night, every self-taught skill, every risk, it all started paying off. And yet, even as my life changed, I couldn't shake that voice in my head. The one that sounded exactly like her. Be realistic. That voice followed me everywhere. When I was pitching my first big client, I heard it whispering, "They'll never take you seriously." When I signed my first real contract, it muttered, "Don't get ahead of yourself." It took years before I realized the only way to silence it was to prove it wrong. Not just to her, but to myself. Then one day, Mom called again. This time, it wasn't small talk. There was tension in her voice. "Ryan, honey," she began carefully, "your sister's having a little issue." I sat back, already sensing the setup. What kind of issue? Well, her fiancé's law firm isn't doing as well as they expected, and the market's been rough. They're a bit tight on cash right now. I told her you might be able to help. Help how? Just a small loan, she said quickly. Temporary, of course. You're doing well now, right? You could spare a little. I felt my heart pound, not in shock, but in disbelief at how effortlessly she shifted from mocking to asking. You want me to give Claire money? Not give, she corrected. Lend. Family helps family, Ryan. I let out a quiet laugh. Like how you helped me with college. The silence on the other end was sharp. That's not fair, she said finally. We did what we thought was best for the family. Right, I said. For the family. She changed the subject quickly, pretending not to hear the bitterness in my voice. But something in me cracked that day, not from anger, but clarity. She would never change. To her, I'd always be the backup plan. The fixer. The one who didn't matter until he became useful. That realization didn't make me sad this time. It made me focused. Because now, for the first time, I had the power to choose how the story ended. And the next time she tried to use me to prop up her perfect daughter, I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to make her remember every single time she told me to be realistic. And I'd do it in a way she'd never forget. The next few months after that call were oddly quiet, too quiet. My mom had this pattern. She'd call, ask for something, I'd refuse, and then there'd be silence while she regrouped for the next attempt. So when 3 months passed without a word, I figured she'd finally moved on. I was wrong. The betrayal didn't happen like a thunderclap. It crept up slowly, the kind of thing you only notice when it's already too late to stop. It started with an email. I'd just come out of a meeting with a potential investor, one that could take my company to the next level. My phone buzzed as I got in the car, and I saw an unfamiliar name in my inbox. David Harlan, senior partner, Harlan & Associates. My first thought was that it might be a client inquiry. I opened it, half distracted. Mr. Ryan Carter, it read. We recently received your contact information from a family member, Mrs. Elaine Carter. She mentioned you were seeking a financial advisor for your business and recommended we reach out. Please let us know a convenient time to discuss how we can support your investment portfolio. I frowned. I had never asked my mom to find me an advisor, and I sure as hell hadn't given her permission to share my business information with anyone. My portfolio? My company wasn't even public. I scrolled down and saw a scanned referral form attached, signed by my mother. It listed my company name, partial financial details, and even my projected revenue for the next quarter, numbers only a few people knew. I felt a rush of heat climb my neck. That data wasn't public. I told her nothing about my finances. So how did she? Then I saw it. The referral included a note in her handwriting. Ryan has been struggling to manage his business accounts responsibly and could use professional guidance. Please reach out to him before he makes another risky decision. I just stared at the screen, frozen. It was such a small thing, but it cut deeper than any insult ever had. Because it wasn't just meddling, it was sabotage. She'd taken the one thing I'd built entirely on my own and painted me as some clueless kid who needed saving. For a moment, I actually laughed, That hollow, disbelieving laugh that comes right before anger hits full force. Then I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my breathing. She'd done it again. Undermined me. Publicly. Quietly. Completely. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring, chipper as ever. Ryan, what a nice surprise. Why did you give my financial information to a stranger? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. There was a pause. Oh, that. Don't be dramatic, honey. He's a friend of a friend, a reputable advisor. I was just trying to help. Help? I repeated. By telling him I can't manage my own business? You sent my numbers, Mom. My private company data. She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Ryan, you've always been so sensitive about these things. I was just trying to make sure you're not getting in over your head. I worry about you, you know. You're not exactly financially minded. Not financially minded, I said, disbelief spilling into my tone. I built a profitable company from scratch. I've been managing contracts, payroll, taxes, everything on my own for years. Well, she said lightly, I just thought maybe someone with experience could help polish things up. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of real investors, do you? I went silent, because if I said anything, I might have said something I couldn't take back. Finally, I managed, don't ever do that again. Oh, come on, she said. You're overreacting. It's not like I gave him your passwords. I hung up. For days after, I couldn't focus. Every line of code I wrote blurred together. I kept seeing her handwriting in my head. Those words, struggling to manage his business responsibly. That wasn't concern. That was control disguised as care. A week later, I got a call from my bank. Mr. Carter, we received a request to review your account activity for possible fraud, the manager said. Apparently, a relative expressed concern about irregular transfers. My heart sank. A relative? Yes, ma'am, Elaine Carter. That's when the full picture clicked into place. She wasn't just trying to help. She was trying to take over. See, my mom had this obsession with appearances, the kind that went beyond vanity. To her, control was everything. Control over her family, her image, her narrative. And my growing success was a threat to that control. If I became truly independent, not just financially, but emotionally, it meant she no longer had power over me. So she did what she always did. She manipulated the story. She'd tell relatives I was struggling with my finances, that I was too proud to ask for help. I didn't find out until my aunt called, worried, asking if I was okay. When I told her the truth, that the company was thriving, she sounded confused. Your mother said you were having trouble paying rent. Rent. I own my apartment. That was when something inside me broke. Not the angry kind of break, more like when a bridge finally gives out after years of quiet strain. I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. Then came the moment that truly sealed it. The betrayal that went from personal to business. It was late one night when I got an email from one of my biggest clients, a logistics firm I'd been working with for almost 2 years. They'd been a huge part of my revenue stream, and I'd built their custom software myself. The email subject read, "Concerns regarding company stability." My stomach dropped. The message was polite but pointed. "We were recently contacted by someone claiming to be a financial representative of your family, suggesting your business may not be stable enough for continued partnership. Could you please confirm the status of your company?" Attached was a voicemail transcription, and even before I played it, I knew the voice. "Hello, this is Elaine Carter, Ryan's mother," it began. "I just wanted to let you know that he's been having some personal and financial issues. I'd hate for your company to be negatively impacted if things go south. Maybe reconsider any large-scale contracts for now." I sat there, numb, my hand frozen over the mouse. She'd actually called one of my clients. Pretended to represent me. Tried to scare them off. It took me hours to decide what to do. I could have called her, screamed, demanded an apology, but I didn't. Instead, I called the client directly, explained everything, and emailed them proof of my company's clean financials. They were sympathetic, thankfully, and agreed to continue working with me. But they were cautious now. That single act had shaken their trust, and it cost me weeks of damage control. When I finally confronted her, I didn't even raise my voice. "Why would you call one of my clients?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Because you weren't listening to me. You're taking on too much, Ryan. I was worried you'd embarrass yourself again." "Again?" I repeated. "When did I ever?" She cut me off. "You've always needed guidance, but you refuse to take it. You think you know everything, but but you're still that lost boy tinkering with computers in his bedroom. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. Protect me. That was her word for sabotage. I don't need your protection, I said, my voice cold. I need you to stop ruining everything I build. There was silence. Then, in that familiar condescending tone, she said, you wouldn't have anything to build if it weren't for us. Who paid for your first computer? Who raised you? Who gave you a roof over your head? And there it was. The guilt card. The one she always played when cornered. I hung up without replying. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Pure, unshakable clarity. I realized my mom didn't just doubt me. She resented that I'd built something she couldn't control. And the more successful I became, the more desperate she grew to remind me that she still had power. That night, I deleted her number. Not out of rage, but resolve. But of course, when you cut off someone who feeds on control, they don't disappear quietly. They come back louder. And when she did, she didn't just want to get back into my life. She wanted to tear it apart. It started with my sister. When Claire called, her voice carried that polished calm that always made me uneasy, the kind of calm that hides bad news behind polite syllables. Hey, Ree, she said too softly. Mom told me you've been distant lately. Everything okay? It had been months since I'd heard her voice, but she still sounded the same. Careful, rehearsed, like every sentence went through a filter before it reached her tongue. I'm fine, I said. Just busy. I know, she replied. Mom said your business is doing okay? I could practically hear the question mark at the end. That subtle doubt, wrapped in sisterly concern. It stung more than I wanted to admit. It's doing great, actually, I said. She hesitated. Oh, that's good. There was a pause, long enough for me to know she wasn't calling just to check in. Look, I'll just say it, she said finally. Eric and I are going through some things. Financially. I didn't respond. We invested in a property development deal that didn't pan out. Lost a big chunk of our savings. It's just bad timing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said flatly. She exhaled. Mom thought maybe you could help us get back on our feet. Just a loan. Nothing crazy. There it was again. The family pattern. The same rhythm every time. A crisis. Then my mom's voice behind it, pushing someone toward me. Claire, I said slowly. You know I love you, but I can't be the family's safety net. I worked too hard to get where I am. I get it, she said quickly, but her tone shifted, defensive, almost irritated. It's not like we're asking for charity. You've got money now, right? You could help without even noticing. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You know what's funny? 10 years ago, Mom emptied my college fund for your down payment. She said I needed to be realistic. You remember that? She went silent. I took out loans, worked nights, lived in a one-room apartment that smelled like mold. I didn't ask anyone for help. So forgive me if I'm not rushing to hand over cash now that the tables turned. Her voice softened. Ryan, it wasn't my decision. I didn't even know she used your fund. That was a lie, or maybe a half-truth, the kind she'd always used when guilt crept in. Mom told me you cried tears of joy the day she gave you the keys, I said quietly. Ryan, that's not fair. No, I said, it's finally fair. I hung up before she could reply. For the next few weeks, things went eerily silent. No calls from Claire. No messages from Mom. Not even a passive-aggressive voicemail. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally drawn a line they wouldn't cross. I was wrong. One Tuesday morning, I woke up to a storm of notifications. Missed calls, texts, emails. I thought something terrible had happened. In a way, it had. My business account had been flagged for unauthorized access. Someone had tried to log in from a device linked to an email with my mother's name. I couldn't believe it at first. I checked twice. The recovery contact number on the attempted login request matched hers. It took me a full hour to process what that meant. She'd actually tried to access my company account. Maybe she thought she could help manage my money. Maybe she wanted to see how much I really had. Maybe she didn't believe I was as successful as I said I was. Whatever her reason, it was a violation that left me shaking. I confronted her that night. Mom, I said, voice low, controlled. Why did you try to log into my business account? I didn't, she said immediately. What are you talking about? I got the security alert. It was your email. Your number. Her tone sharpened. I don't know what you're accusing me of, but I don't appreciate the tone, Ryan. I clenched my jaw. You're lying. Watch your mouth, she snapped. I was just checking on things. You've been avoiding us, and I was worried something was wrong. I thought maybe you'd gotten hacked. I laughed bitterly. You tried to hack me yourself. How dare you? She said, indignant now. After everything I've done for you. You're so ungrateful. I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. Then you stole my college fund, tried to destroy my reputation, and now you're breaking into my business, I interrupted. So yeah, I guess we're even. There was silence. Then, in the smallest, most cutting voice she could manage, she said, You've really changed, Ryan. You used to care about family. And that was it. That one sentence, that guilt-drenched dagger, broke something in me. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, good, and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office, the glow of my computer the only light in the room, thinking about how far things had fallen. My mom, my own mother, had crossed a line I didn't think she ever would. For the first time in years, I felt small again. Like the kid sitting on the porch at sunrise after losing his college fund. Except this time, I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to drag me back down. Because people like her, people who feed off control, can't stand watching someone they underestimated rise without them. The next morning, I decided to disappear for a while. Not literally. I didn't pack up and leave town. But I withdrew. I stopped answering calls, stopped posting online, stopped showing up at family events. I poured everything into work. If my mom wanted to see me fail, I'd make sure she had to squint from the bottom of the mountain to even recognize me. But isolation comes with its own kind of loneliness. I'd built walls so high that sometimes I couldn't even see the horizon. I'd wake up, code for 16 hours straight, eat cold takeout, then crash at my desk. I told myself it was progress, but deep down, I knew I was hiding. One night, months later, I got an email from an old friend, Evan, the guy who'd been my first hire when my company started. We hadn't talked in a while, not since he'd moved to another city to work at a tech firm. Hey man, he wrote. Saw your name mentioned in a business article today. Congrats on the new contracts. You're killing it. We should catch up sometime. For a long moment, I just stared at the message. Killing it. I didn't feel like it. I felt empty. That's when it hit me. My mom had taken years of my confidence, but she hadn't taken my drive. I'd let her occupy too much space in my head. I'd built my whole success around proving her wrong. But I didn't want to live my life in opposition anymore. I wanted to live it for myself. That realization was small but powerful, like the first crack of light through a locked window. So I started making quiet changes. I reached out to a few old friends I'd pushed away, started mentoring a couple of young programmers, got back into running, began sketching out plans for something bigger, a project that wasn't just about money, but meaning. Something mine, untouched by family drama. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Claire, especially not Mom. But of course, silence only made them more curious. One evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Claire. Mom's been asking about you, she said. She thinks you're avoiding her. I am. She sighed. You know she doesn't mean to hurt you, right? She just doesn't know how to show love the way you want. I almost laughed. Breaking into my bank account isn't love, Claire. I know, she said quietly. I'm not defending her. But she's been different lately. More paranoid. She keeps saying she thinks you're hiding something. She's right, I said. There was a long pause. Ryan, what are you planning? Nothing, I said. Just working. But that wasn't the truth. Because in the back of my mind, something was already forming. An idea, a moment, a reckoning. Not revenge, exactly. Not yet. But something close. I wanted them to see me the way they never had before. Not the realistic one. Not the disappointment. Not the safety net. The next time they saw me, I wanted it to be impossible to ignore. And as the first outlines of that plan took shape, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I was creating my own destiny. And somewhere deep down, I knew the day would come when I'd invite them back into my world, just long enough for them to realize what they'd thrown away. That day was closer than I thought. The shift didn't happen overnight. There was no lightning strike moment. No dramatic montage of me suddenly becoming unstoppable. It was slower, quieter, like the slow dawn that you don't notice until the light has already filled the room. For months, I kept my head down and built. I was still running my company, but now it had evolved into something bigger than I'd ever imagined. What started as a small software tool had become a full-fledged platform. a scalable service used by dozens of mid-sized businesses across multiple industries. I'd assembled a small but loyal team, developers, designers, and one brilliant operations manager named Mia, who joined when I could finally afford to pay real salaries. We worked out of a cramped co-working space downtown at first, surrounded by startups that were mostly dreams on napkins. Ours wasn't glamorous either, but we had something they didn't: traction. Our users weren't hypothetical. They were real companies paying real money. Every new client meant validation. Every positive review meant momentum. The thing that drove me hardest, though, wasn't the money. It was that, for the first time in my life, I was building something that worked. Every problem had a solution. Every setback had a way forward. My company became my redemption arc, the thing that made all those years of being underestimated finally make sense. But success doesn't stay small for long. By my late 20s, our product was being noticed by investors. I still remember sitting in that glass-walled office during our first big funding meeting, wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, surrounded by people twice my age and 5 times my net worth. "So," one of them said, leaning back in his chair, "you're telling me this entire system was coded by you personally in the first version?" "Yeah," I said. "I built it in my apartment." He raised his eyebrows. "And now you're managing 6 developers?" "7," I corrected with a small smile. "We just hired another." When we left that meeting, I expected nothing. But a week later, we got the call: $1.2 million in seed funding. I remember sitting alone in my car afterward, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't excited at first. I was just quiet. Because in that moment, I realized something simple and terrifying. Every limitation I'd ever believed about myself came from her voice, not mine. And I'd finally outgrown it. That night, I opened a blank document and started writing goals. Not small ones, big ones. I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building a legacy. Within 2 years, we expanded into 2 offices, one downtown, one in another state. Our client list tripled. Industry magazines started mentioning our name. I was invited to speak on panels, asked to consult on projects I used to dream about. And through all of it, I said nothing to my family. Not because I wanted to be petty, though maybe, deep down, there was a small part of me that enjoyed the silence, but because I wanted my success to speak for itself. I wanted the reveal to come when they least expected it, in a way that would leave no room for excuses or denial. During those years, I barely saw Claire or Mom. Occasionally, I'd get updates through distant relatives. "Your sister bought another house. Your mom's hosting some charity event. They were asking about you." Asking about me. That phrase always made me smirk. They weren't asking out of love. They were asking out of curiosity or fear. They could sense something shifting, even if they didn't know what it was. Then one day, fate threw me a strange kind of test. I was attending a business conference out of town. It was one of those polished corporate gatherings with badges, networking tables, and lukewarm coffee. I'd just finished speaking on a panel when someone approached me, smiling like they recognized me. "Ryan Carter, right?" he said, shaking my hand. "I'm Eric. Eric Lawrence." The name hit me before the face did. Claire's fiancé. He looked a little older, a little more tired than I remembered from those Facebook photos Mom used to post. The ones where they both looked like they'd won the genetic lottery. "I didn't know you were in tech," he said, feigning casual surprise. I smiled politely. "I didn't know you went to these conferences." He chuckled. "Just trying to stay relevant. I heard about your company, by the way. You're the guy behind Synthra Systems, right?" I nodded slowly. "That's me." His tone shifted, friendly, but cautious. "You've made quite a name for yourself. I had no idea you were doing so well." "Neither did my family," I said evenly. He hesitated, then offered an awkward smile. "You know, Claire talks about you sometimes." "Does she?" "She feels bad, you know," he said, lowering his voice. "About how things went down with the college fund. And your mom, she didn't mean to. She meant every word." I interrupted. "She just didn't expect me to prove her wrong." Eric looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet. "Well, she's proud of you now." "Funny," I said. "She hasn't told me that herself." He gave a half-hearted laugh, mumbled something about catching another panel, and walked away. That night, in my hotel room, I couldn't stop thinking about that line. "She's proud of you now." Proud of what? Proud that I'd succeeded without her? Proud that her narrative had collapsed? Or was it just another line? Something she said to make herself feel better about what she'd done? Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't chasing her approval anymore. A year later, my company hit 8 figures in valuation. We opened a new headquarters, a penthouse office overlooking the city skyline. I moved into the same building, top floor. It wasn't about showing off. It was about proximity. I wanted to wake up every morning and see what I'd built. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who was too unrealistic for college now owned more property than his mom and sister combined. But even then, I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I just worked. Mia, my operations manager, noticed the shift in me. One night after a late strategy meeting, she said, "You're different lately. Calmer. Like you already know how this story ends." I smiled. "Maybe I do. Does it involve your family?" she asked gently. I paused. "Eventually." She nodded. "When you're ready." I was. But before I could make my move, fate delivered one more twist, the kind of poetic coincidence that almost felt scripted. It was a Friday morning when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. "Ryan? It's Claire." Her voice trembled slightly. "Mom's in the hospital." I sat back, silent. She collapsed at her charity event. They said it was exhaustion, maybe stress-related. "She's okay, but you should probably come." I hesitated for a long moment before saying, "I'll think about it." "Ryan, please," she said. "She's been asking for you." I almost laughed. "Now she wants me around?" "Don't do this," Claire said softly. "Whatever happened, she's still our mom." Our mom. The phrase didn't land the way it used to. I said I'd see what I could do and hung up. That night, I went anyway. Not for her, but for closure. When I walked into that hospital room, she looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. Her hair was grayer, her skin thinner, but her eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, hadn't changed. "Ryan," she said softly. "You came." I nodded, standing by the door. "You look better than I expected." She smiled faintly. "You always had a sarcastic streak." I didn't respond. "I heard you've done well for yourself," she said finally. "Your sister told me. I'm proud of you." There it was. The sentence I'd wanted to hear since I was a teenager. And now that it was in the air, it felt hollow. Empty. Too late. "I didn't do it for you," I said quietly. She sighed. "You still hold grudges, don't you?" "I hold memories," I corrected. We sat in silence for a while. She kept trying to steer the conversation toward small talk, but I wasn't interested. Every word between us felt like a negotiation for emotional ground. When I left that night, I didn't say goodbye. I just said, "Take care of yourself." But as I walked down the sterile hallway, something unexpected stirred inside me. Not pity, not forgiveness, but a sense of completion. Like a story was quietly reaching its turning point. Because the next time she saw me, it wouldn't be in a hospital room. It would be at a celebration, one she'd never forget. And for the first time in my life, I'd be the one setting the stage. When Mom was discharged from the hospital, the old rhythm of our family started to creep back. Calls, texts, invitations to catch up. But something had changed, and it wasn't just me. I wasn't that ignored kid anymore. I wasn't even just her son. By that point, I was a man who ran a multi-million-dollar company, one with contracts, investors, and enough influence to make people like her pause before talking down to me. At least, that's what I thought. The first time I saw her again after the hospital, she invited me to brunch at Claire's place. "Just family," she'd said, "like old times." Against my better judgment, I went, part curiosity, part strategy. I wanted to see what game she was playing now. The moment I walked through the door, I realized nothing had changed at all. Claire's house, her second, apparently, looked like something out of a real estate magazine. Polished white floors, designer furniture, the kind of chandelier that exists purely to scream, "We have money." Mom was sitting on the sofa, sipping coffee like royalty, and Claire was in the kitchen, organizing pastries into perfect rows. "Ryan," Mom said brightly, standing to hug me like nothing had ever happened. "You look wonderful. Don't you think he looks good, Claire?" Claire smiled faintly. "Yeah, different. More polished." "Success suits you," Mom added, in that backhanded way she did. "I'm glad you're finally finding your place." I smiled. "Took a while, but yeah, things are good." They exchanged a look. That same old "we'll see how long that lasts" glance I knew too well. Mom started asking questions about my work, pretending to be interested. "What exactly is it you do again?" "You build apps." I kept my tone even. "We design enterprise software systems for logistics and automation. Mostly large-scale companies now." Oh, she said, clearly not understanding a word but pretending to. And people pay you for that? I almost laughed. Yeah, Mom. They pay me for that. Claire leaned in. You must be doing pretty well then. I could feel where this was going. I manage, I said. We're expanding, but I try to stay grounded. Mom smiled tightly. That's good. You always were a dreamer, Ryan. I just hope you're being careful. You remember what happened with your cousin. He invested too quickly and lost everything. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I remember. They kept talking, mostly about themselves, of course, while I watched. Every comment, every tone shift, every calculated smile reminded me why I'd spent years avoiding this. But it wasn't just bitterness anymore. It was analysis, observation. They still saw me as that boy sitting in his room, tinkering with computers, living on hope and cheap instant noodles. They didn't realize that while they'd been polishing appearances, I'd been quietly building leverage. And that leverage was about to pay off. 2 weeks after that brunch, my company landed its biggest contract yet, a deal with a national firm that would double our revenue in under a year. Investors were ecstatic. We'd gone from a small startup to a legitimate player in the industry. We even had an offer from a larger company looking to acquire us. That deal, if it went through, would change everything. One evening, I was going through paperwork in my office when Mia knocked on my door. You've got visitors, she said, looking hesitant. Who? She smiled faintly. A woman who says she's your mother and another who looks like her. I exhaled. Perfect timing. They walked in like they owned the place. Mom looked around the office, all glass and skyline views, and gave a low whistle. This is where you work. I nodded. And live. You live here? She asked, almost scandalized. The penthouse upstairs. It's convenient. Claire grinned. Wow, fancy. You always were dramatic. Mom gave her a look. Be polite. Then to me, she said, this is impressive, Ryan. I had no idea you'd done so well for yourself. That's because you never asked, I said evenly. She ignored that. So tell me, do you own this company outright? I raised an eyebrow. Why? She smiled sweetly. Just curious. I mean, you must have partners or investors or something. You can't do all this alone. I leaned back in my chair. Mostly alone. I have investors now, but I own the majority. Her eyes lit up. That was the moment I knew exactly why she'd shown up. It wasn't about family or pride or reconciliation. It was about opportunity. That's incredible, she said softly. I'm proud of you, honey. Truly. You've built something amazing. I stared at her. What do you want, Mom? The mask slipped just slightly. Can't I just visit my son? Not without a reason. She hesitated, then sighed. Your sister and Eric are going through some financial troubles again. The housing market hasn't been kind. I thought maybe. There it is, I said quietly. Claire looked embarrassed. Mom, maybe we should. No, I interrupted. Let her finish. Mom's voice grew firmer. You have more than enough, Ryan. Family helps family. We've always believed that. I laughed. No, you believed that when I was the one being drained. When I needed help, you called it a lesson in humility. Don't twist things, she said sharply. We made sacrifices for you. You made choices, I corrected. Ones that benefited Claire. Let's not rewrite history. She gave me a long, cold look. The same look she used to give me when I was a kid caught talking back. But I wasn't a kid anymore. I stood. This meeting's over. Ryan, Claire said quietly, please. It's just temporary. We'll pay you back. I turned to her. You won't. You never do. Mom frowned. You've really become bitter, haven't you? No, I said, stepping closer. I've just stopped letting people take advantage of me. They left soon after, offended and whispering under their breath. But before Mom walked out the door, she turned and said, you'll regret this. Money doesn't last forever. I smiled. Neither does control. After they were gone, Mia poked her head in again. You okay? I nodded slowly. Better than ever. That night, I stayed late, watching the city lights reflect against the glass. Their visit had confirmed what I already knew. They still thought I was beneath them emotionally, even if I'd surpassed them financially. They would never respect me because respect requires humility, and neither of them had ever learned it. But that's when I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need their respect. What I needed was a moment. The perfect, poetic moment that would make every be realistic echo in their heads forever. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A few months later, our acquisition deal was finalized. The number was staggering, 9 figures. I retained a stake in a leadership position. Overnight, I went from a founder running a startup to the CEO of a subsidiary under a major conglomerate. My name was suddenly on press releases, business articles, interviews. For the first time, the world knew who I was, and by extension, so did my family. The texts started rolling in again. "So proud of you, sweetheart. We always knew you had it in you. Your sister told me about the news. Can we celebrate?" I didn't respond to a single one. Not yet, because I had something bigger in mind. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, glass of whiskey in hand, looking down at the glowing city, an idea came to me, not out of anger, but out of clarity. A company event, a grand celebration for the acquisition. Investors, clients, press, the whole high-profile crowd. And maybe, just maybe, I'd extend 2 very specific invitations. The kind printed on thick ivory paper. The kind you can't ignore. I smiled to myself as I envisioned it. My mother, walking through the doors of the building she once told me I'd never belong in. My sister, realizing she was standing inside the penthouse her mother's less successful son owned. It wouldn't be revenge through humiliation or cruelty. It would be revenge through truth. A living, breathing contradiction of everything they'd ever believed about me. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and whispered to no one in particular. "Let's make this unforgettable." The invitations went out 2 weeks later. Gold embossed, sealed in thick envelopes, hand-delivered by courier. I made sure the text was simple, elegant, and impossible to misinterpret. "You are cordially invited to the Synthra Systems acquisition celebration. Hosted by founder and CEO, Ryan Carter. Penthouse level, Skyline Tower. Friday, 7 p.m. I sent one to Claire's address, one to my mother's, and then I waited. The night of the event, the penthouse gleamed. The entire top floor had been transformed. White marble floors, champagne stations, a panoramic view of the city glittering below. A string quartet played softly near the balcony, and servers in black suits circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. It wasn't just a party. It was a statement. As guests arrived, investors, executives, journalists, I greeted them one by one. Smiles, handshakes, flashes of cameras. My PR director whispered that the local news was doing a feature on self-made entrepreneurs. I nodded, half listening. I wasn't focused on the press. I was waiting for them. At exactly 7:42 p.m., the elevator doors opened, and there they were. My mother, in a sparkling silver dress, her arm hooked through Claire's. Both of them paused at the entrance, taking in the room. Mom's eyes widened as she saw the view. The same skyline she used to tell me was for people who live in the real world. Now, she was standing in the middle of it. Claire looked nervous, glancing around. She spotted me across the room and gave a tentative wave. I smiled. "You made it." "Of course," Mom said, walking toward me. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." Her voice carried that practiced grace, the same tone she used when trying to impress strangers. She leaned in to kiss my cheek. "This is incredible, Ryan. Truly, I had no idea it would be so extravagant. I wanted to celebrate properly," I said. "After all, it's been a long journey." "Oh, I can imagine," she said, scanning the crowd. "And you've done so well for yourself. I was just telling Claire, it must have been all that discipline I taught you growing up." I chuckled. "Something like that. For a while, I let them mingle. I wanted them to feel comfortable, surrounded by the very world they'd once told me was out of reach." I watched as Mom chatted animatedly with investors, pretending she understood their business jargon, laughing too loudly at jokes she didn't get. Claire stayed quieter, sipping champagne and looking at the city through the glass walls. Every so often, her gaze drifted toward me, half admiration, half guilt. When the speeches began, I took the stage. The room fell silent as the lights dimmed slightly, leaving only the glow of the skyline behind me. I adjusted the microphone, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "It means a lot to have so many incredible people here, colleagues, partners, friends, celebrating what we've built together." There was polite applause. I continued, my tone calm, deliberate. "For those who don't know, Synthra Systems started in a one-room apartment. No investors, no safety net, just an old laptop, a coffee maker, and an idea." I paused, scanning the room until my gaze met my mother's. "I was told, once, that I needed to be realistic. That some people are meant to chase dreams, and others are meant to accept limits. That success wasn't for everyone. A faint murmur rippled through the crowd. My mother's smile froze. I went on. I believed that for a long time. I believed that maybe I wasn't meant to build anything lasting. But then I realized, the only limits that matter are the ones you accept. There was a beat of silence. Then applause, warm, genuine. Cameras flashed. I smiled, letting it fade slowly as my gaze lingered on her. So tonight isn't just a celebration of business success. It's a reminder, for anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, that no one else defines your worth. I stepped back, nodded to the host, and the music swelled again. Mom didn't clap. She just stared, her expression tight, her eyes sharp like glass under pressure. Claire looked down, shame flickering across her face. After the speech, I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, answering questions, laughing where appropriate. But my attention was still on them. Mom eventually found me again near the bar. Her smile was brittle. That speech, she said softly, was pointed. I met her eyes. Was it? You didn't need to make things sound so personal. They were personal. She straightened her shoulders. You think humiliating me in front of strangers makes you powerful? I took a sip of champagne, then set the glass down. No, I think finally telling the truth does. Her lips tightened. You've really changed, Ryan. Good, I said. That was the point. For the first time that night, she didn't have a comeback. She turned away, searching for Claire, who was standing near the balcony. I followed them quietly. Claire's voice was low but heated. He's right, Mom. You treated him like garbage for years. Watch your tone, Mom hissed. You think you're any better? You both would be nowhere without me. Claire laughed bitterly. Without you? You used his college fund for my house. Their voices were starting to draw attention. A few guests turned to look. I stepped forward. Ladies, let's not make a scene. Mom glared at me. You wanted a scene. Don't act innocent now. I smiled slightly. You're right. I did. She froze. What? I gestured toward the glass wall overlooking the skyline. You see that building across the street? She turned. The logo of my company's new parent corporation glowed from the tower, 20 stories high. I own that view, I said quietly. The company, the contracts, the partnerships, everything you said I'd never have, it's all right there. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, You planned this. Every second. Her face went pale. Claire stood silently beside her, torn between guilt and awe. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. The words wouldn't come. For once, she had nothing to say. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low enough that only she could hear. You told me to be realistic. So I was. I stopped expecting you to love me for who I was, and started loving the version of me you couldn't see. She blinked hard, like she might cry, but her pride wouldn't let her. She just turned away and walked toward the elevator, chin trembling, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Claire stayed behind. She'll never admit it, she said quietly, but you broke her tonight. I looked at her. I didn't break her. I showed her the mirror she's been avoiding. Claire nodded slowly. She'll hate you for it. Maybe, I said, but she'll remember it. Claire gave a small, sad smile. I'm sorry for everything, Ryan. For not standing up for you back then. I should have said something. I looked at her for a long moment. You still can, but not with words. She nodded, and for the first time in years, we hugged. No theatrics, no awkward apologies, just quiet understanding. When the night ended and the last guests left, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, I knew my mother was sitting in silence, replaying every word, every moment, every time she told me to aim lower. And maybe, just maybe, she was realizing what it felt like to be wrong. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel triumphant. Just at peace. Revenge hadn't been about humiliation. It had been about reclaiming the story, about showing her, and myself, that I'd never needed her permission to become more than what she imagined. As the lights of the city reflected in the glass, I lifted my glass one final time, a quiet toast to no one in particular. To being realistic, I said softly. Just not the way she meant. And for the first time in my life, the words didn't hurt. They felt like freedom.